Thank you very much. One thing I do want to bring to light, and you've both touched on it, Steve and Michael, for every dollar we're not spending right now, I guess the formula batters around $9 additional cost. And you take that into perspective, for every billion that we're not spending now, it's $9 billion is costing us additional every year. And, you capitalize on it. If there's a $5.7 billion need right now, times that by 9, that's almost $50 billion a year that is costing us going forward. So if you look at that in your own areas, Steve, you have all the bridges and stuff that you're talking about. How much deficit would this create going forward on the bridges, just alone on the bridges in your district?
Well, you make a very good point, and just apply your multiple to the shortfall we have right now. I mean, local roads is an example, $20 billion. So apply that multiple. And as you know, it's not just the cost that delay imposes on the public sector. It imposes that cost on every motorist. And frankly, most people, where you have really bad roads, in California usually is top 5 or bottom 5 nationally, most people are paying more to fix their car than they would in the higher tax to ride on a smooth road. So it just doesn't pencil out in terms of family economics. Right now, we're imposing a tax increase on people sort of surreptitiously, and it's the tax they pay every time they drive their car on crummy roads.
I would also add, in Southern California, there's also a unique dynamic, and if you drive the 2 right lanes of the freeway in most of Southern California, those are the 2 lanes that are used by trucks. And if you go along the 710, the 60, the 10, and the 5, there are 2 lanes that are the arteries that move a goods movement system throughout Southern California. And those 2 lanes experience a significant amount of damage because there are a tremendous amount of trucks and goods that move through that corridor. So there's an economic impact to one of the major industries in Southern California because those trucks get damaged. Those trucks take time. We have accidents on those freeways because of poor pavement condition and congestion. And that is a unique issue to Southern California. And so it certainly affects the goods movement area through our region, particularly along a number of freeways like the 710, the 60, and the 10.
I can agree. I just had a pothole come loose on the freeway and took out my windshield, so I can identify. Mr. Linder, I'm sorry I didn't see you.
Thank you. Kind of on the same subject, we had talked earlier about a $300 billion deficit or a 5.7 annual deficit, and I know that none of you are environmental scientists, but I'm wondering if the roads were in top condition and if this funding was there to where we were able to properly maintain and upgrade our roads, what would be the environmental impact as far as greenhouse gases are concerned? I mean, if traffic's flowing smoothly, do we have any idea how much better things would be environmentally?
I'm not sure we can speculate, but I think your question is really driving at a pretty self-evident thing, right? Which is not only does poor pavement cause damage to vehicles, but it reduces fuel efficiency as well, no doubt. So, I mean, it really cascades through the system in so many different ways. And again, as the chairman indicated, what we don't pay for today will pay for more tomorrow. It's not as if we're going to avoid the payment.
And I think more specifically than that is that there's currently a new fee that's applied towards the gasoline purchases that goes towards cap and trades, and I want to make sure to emphasize that is indeed there, and it can definitely be put towards improving the economy as far as fixing our roads and upgrading and maintaining our roads is concerned.
And Assemblyman, maybe just to give you an example from Michael's field, as far as public transit is concerned, if you don't replace those rail cars on time, they're going to start breaking down. And when they break down, you have less reliable service, which means people who would otherwise use that train might drive instead because they want to get to work on time. So that's another indication of a place where if you don't invest in system maintenance, you are going to end up with more driving and more GHG emissions.
Thank you. So we're going to flip the order of speakers at this point. We're going to move to Jennifer Whitting. She's the Assistant Legislative Director with the California League of Cities. Jennifer, hi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm going to present some of the findings of our 2014 Local Streets and Roads Needs Assessment that the cities and counties and regional transportation agencies all work together on. This is much like the SHOP update that the state does every 2 years, where they look at the needs of the system. This looks specifically at local streets and roads. And I'm going to focus mostly on the pavement, but touch on a couple other components of the local streets and road system while we're doing this. Just to give you a snapshot or an idea of what we're talking about, cities and counties own and operate over 80% of the roadways in California. So it's definitely a significant portion of our transportation system in California. And as they were just talking about the trucks and how they have impact on the roads, we also have trucks and we have buses operating on our roads, and the transit systems need our roads to operate and get people around. So we're all very much interconnected. We started this update, or this needs assessment, in 2008. It was the first year we conducted a survey of all 58 counties and 482 cities. At that time, we found that the statewide average pavement condition index was at 68. In our most recent update in 2014, that number had dropped to 66. Now, that doesn't look like a huge drop, or you might not think it's alarming, but I'm going to share in a second why it is. And we also need to keep in mind that during that same time period, we had the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, as well as Prop 1B. So even though there were significant one-time investments in the transportation system, we still saw a decrease in the PCI. And this is why it's truly concerning. You can see the bell curve. This is the lifespan of a local street and road. And 66 is right on the precipice of falling. So our streets and roads are going to deteriorate at a much faster time frame now than they have in the last few years. And that's why we are so concerned. These two maps are snapshots of the average county-wide pavement condition index in 2008 and 2014. You can see that the green is good, the blue is at risk, and the red is poor. You can see that the colors are not going in the right direction. We have significantly more red and significantly less green counties. And now 54 counties have an average PCI that is either at risk or poor. Talking about sustainable pavement practices and co-benefits of maintaining our system, many cities and counties are adopting different sustainable pavement strategies. These not only help the environment, but we're actually finding that some of them have significant cost benefits for us. In fact, you can see pavement preservation alone actually has a 35% savings. In addition, more and more cities and counties are adopting complete streets policies, which support all modes of transportation. So when we go in and we do preserve or maintain a local street or road, we're changing those so that it supports everybody in the community. Talking about funding, the best management practices for our pavement condition index on the local streets and road system is we want to be at 84, and we're at 66. So in order to get to 84, we would need $7.3 billion total a year in funding. If we want to just maintain the pavement condition index at where it is today, we need $3.3 billion a year. And what the local streets and roads system has for pavement alone, the funding, is $1.66 billion a year. And you can see that we are not going to be able to maintain our streets and roads with the current funding. We have to have some more investment immediately on this system. This is a picture of a failed road. You can see that it's hard to tell what lane you're in. Lots of potholes, although these aren't particularly deep, but I'm sure you've all driven on roads that look like this and know that what it looks like. Without some additional investment, the number of roads that are in failed condition are going to increase to 25% in just 10 years. We also wanted to touch a little bit on bridges. More than 50% of the bridges in California are owned by cities and counties. You can see LA is the big bar. They have the most. And we wanted to, this is very concerning, this is the age distribution of the bridges. So 55% of our bridges already require rehabilitation or replacement, and there simply just isn't very much funding for the bridges. The other things that we look at in our needs assessment are the essential components, so sidewalks, ADA, curb and gutter, storm drains, street light, signs, all of those things that we can do while we're maintaining and updating our local streets and road system. So when we look at 10-year needs on the local systems, just the needs, not including funding, we need $108 billion for pavements, essential components, and bridges. And what we have is $29.7 billion. So our 10-year needs as of today are $78.3 billion. Mr. Heminger had talked about the three-legged stool. This gives a good snapshot of that three-legged stool. And of course, this is a statewide snapshot, so in each region or county it would be slightly different. But you can see the green on the screen is local funding statewide. The red is how much we get from the state, and the blue is from federal. You can see where ARA came in 2009 and 10. But federal funding is going down, and we agree the federal government seems to be AWOL in this conversation. It's quite frustrating for all of us. 54% of all money for the local streets and road system comes from the state gas tax. So it is very much a significant portion of the funding that we rely on. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Kiana to talk about how we might find some solutions.
Kiana, it's all you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Good afternoon. Kiana Bess on behalf of the California State Association of Counties in partnership with the League of Cities doing this presentation on the local roads this afternoon. As you've just heard, CSAC, the League, and our regional transportation partners have done exhaustive research to define the needs on the local system, but we also think this research can be very informative with respect to the outcomes we can achieve for the local street and road system with respect to different funding scenarios and proposed funding solutions. For instance, this report has informed us, we know that waiting just 5 years to invest additional revenues into the local system adds an $11 billion price tag to the shortfall and $21 billion over the next decade. So looking at that statistic in a vacuum alone for just the local system, we believe that information coming from the report really demands an swift action in the next in this current legislative session to avoid higher costs to taxpayers in the future. So as Jennifer and my other colleagues on this panel have defined, we have a well-defined problem. So the main question before you all and us as transportation stakeholders today is how do we make a significant investment that will actually tackle the comprehensive system shortfalls on both the state highways and local streets and roads? And what are the attributes of the potential funding solutions that you all are considering? And I would add that I completely agree with Mr. Heminger's point about what are the goals that we are trying to achieve and aligning those funding solutions with those goals. Also pleased to hear the presentation from Executive Director Kempton with respect to his ideas on the priorities and policies that should be a part of any solution: immediate, sustainable, predictable, user fee-based, substantial, and dedicated. I think CSAC and the League would agree with all of those principles with respect to solutions. We also know that from focus group and polling efforts from the California Alliance for Jobs and Transportation California over the past few months that voters support levying small increases, revenue increases from multiple different sources. We think that this approach promotes fairness because everyone uses the transportation system differently. And it would also avoid sticker shock that could come from raising all of the revenue from a single source. For instance, we looked at how much we would need to raise the gas tax just to address the backfall, the $79.3 billion shortfall. Forgive me, that's a shortfall number on the local street and road system, and it would be 54 cents gas tax alone, and that's not even addressing the needs on the state highway system. So, of course, I think voters could react pretty adversely to seeing something like that overnight. Local governments are in lockstep with the polling data and how this informs solutions. So we have come on board and in support of an array of potential solutions, including increasing the diesel tax to compensate for the damage that heavy vehicles do to both state and local roads, imposing vehicle registration or license fees, as long as those are dedicated to new roadway and highway maintenance, imposing a fee to ensure that zero-emission vehicles are paying their fair share to the damage they do for the roads. I think this is an increasingly important consideration as the share of the fleet, the percentage of those vehicles as an overall share of the fleet grows. And most importantly, we support increasing the gasoline excise tax, which hasn't been adjusted, as you have heard, in over 20 years. You've heard about the reasons fuel economy and inflation are eroding that source. And while we recognize we need to modernize our revenue options, the gas tax is still the swiftest and easiest way today to quickly generate a significant amount of revenue for investment into the local streets and road system and state highways while we develop longer-term solutions. The way we use any new revenue is just as important as how we collect it. And CSAC and the League are in strong support of a fix-it-first approach with a focus on maintenance and preservation of the existing system. I think the polling that I referenced earlier also supports voters have a strong support for investing in the maintenance of the existing system before investing in new capital or other types of programs. We also think that that any new revenue raise should be shared equally between the state and local systems, as I think we've tried to demonstrate both from speakers from this that represent state highways and regional and local roads that the systems are completely intertwined. We share revenue from both state, local, and federal sources, and our mutual constituents drive on both systems. I don't think when they're driving to work and school that they recognize whether they're on a local road, a state road, etc. We shouldn't reinvent the wheel with respect to allocating maintenance money as well. Locals have historically received gas tax through direct subventions. This has worked effectively because there is a lot of transparency and accountability at the local level. Cities and counties adopt project lists within annual budgets and also provide extensive reports to the state controller every year on all revenues received and expenditures made across a variety of types of programs that cities and counties invest in. Nor should we forget the pavement management systems that cities and counties are required to use in order to develop the most cost-effective investment plans that address the local, individualized communities' most dire needs. Accordingly, local governments would support additional accountability and transparency measures, such as the ones that we agreed to in Proposition 1B from 2006, whereby we provided the Department of Finance, and you can insert that for another state department or agency, project lists at the beginning of the year as well as end of the year project reporting, so that you as our elected officials, states, and constituents, that was all put on a website, and so it was made very public, and locals were kept held accountable to the promises that they made to the voters at the beginning of the year. Finally, to keep the confidence of the voters, we must ensure that all new revenues are dedicated to transportation. Voters have supported this approach time and time again. We've seen Proposition 42, Proposition 1A a number of years later. And so those are some of our thoughts with respect to the principles that should be included in any funding solution. I'll wrap up by saying we recognize that the challenge of tackling both the state and local system funding shortfalls is very significant and difficult. The good news is that cities and counties stand ready to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into the local system right away. We can put that to use on maintenance of existing systems, safety projects, and other important investments. Jennifer had outlined for you what would happen if we don't receive any new revenue. I'll remind you, PCI drops from an at-risk category of a 66 to a failed condition of 55 in the next decade. And recognizing generating $8 billion annually just for cities and counties would be a very difficult choice in order to get it to best management practices. So we think that with an investment of $3 billion a year over the next 10 years, we can make significant strides. With $3 billion a year, cities and counties could bring roads into a good condition, or a PCI of 73. And we avoid an additional $21 billion of backlog. The further the system falls into disrepair, the more expensive it becomes to fix, and this challenge becomes all the more daunting. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to provide you with this information, and CSAC and the League look forward to partnering with you all as we tackle these important issues.
Before we go any further, do any of the committee members have any questions for Jennifer or Kiana? You guys do a really good job. No questions. So we'll move on to Rob Lapsley. Did you have a question, Chair?
No, Mr. Chair, just if I leave, it's not because of anything else that I have both banking and UNC committee meetings are going on, and I serve on both committees.
Completely understand. Thank you for your presence. We'll move on to Rob Lapsley, the President of the California Business Roundtable. Rob?
Mr. Chairman, members, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for your leadership in trying to address this issue with obviously some very interesting discussions to take place in the very near future. I want to start by expressing our commitment to helping craft a solution on this. You just heard from some of, obviously, the top leaders in the field, from Mr. Kempton to Mr. Heminger and different organizations, and I want to touch on a few of their points, but the key factor is that obviously if the business community in California, if our economy is going to continue to move forward, then this issue is at the backbone of our entire economy. So you've heard that, it's been defined, but let me add one small fact. California since 2009 has grown 1.8 million jobs. That is very good news. But in previous recoveries, particularly back in the 90s, we would have been at over 2.8 million jobs now. So we are still underperforming in terms of our overall recovery, but we see the signs that that is starting to occur. 60% of those jobs in the Bay Area. As we grow those jobs without, obviously, the corresponding infrastructure developments to take place, then we won't get there. So your timing is impeccable, based both on need and on where we are in potential economic growth. And if we can get this issue resolved this year, we are setting the stage for potentially a continued economic expansion of California that could be beyond all of our hopes and aspirations. That is our key. So, in terms of, again, a couple principles, Mr. Kempton obviously has framed it well. My colleagues today did an outstanding job, and we agree with almost everything. So as we go up and down the state from a business community standpoint, we are talking with all of our colleagues. They are poised to be in support of a solution. We want to see a significant investment. Obviously, we know what the needs are. We would ask that all existing transportation loan and truck weight fees be returned to transportation. We ask that you, in this point of time of opportunity, look for the broadest comprehensive solutions. And here's what we mean by that. This is a very unique point in time. As we need more money, it's not just about the money. It's about how to deliver the projects. We can do it better. We can do it faster. The principles have been defined. The projects have taken place. You look at what's happening now with P3s in the Bay Area for the access to the Golden Gate Bridge. There are proven projects that have shown how we can be smarter, more efficient, and use our money more wisely. The people of California expect that. It's going to help the business community. But beyond that, even broader opportunities, if there is a way to come together, if we're going to have pipeline money to get these projects out there quicker, then obviously CEQA has to be addressed. That's not a secret. Maybe it gets addressed for transportation. Maybe it gets addressed in a broader way that helps our overall economic expansion. But either way, we have an opportunity here today and in the next 45 to 60 days to address it. So we ask you to look at things from the broadest possible comprehensive perspective. We ask for a 10-year program as well. You heard that today. We support the fix-it-first approach certainly as well. Common sense governance, and we appreciate, obviously, all of you and what's been shown with the administration on that. Mr. O'Donnell's here, goods and freight movement, number one. We know what that means. We just saw what happened at the ports. We know, again, what our potential is if we unlock the congestion. And, as we said here, unlock the congestion to get our reductions in greenhouse gas. The business community supports the goals on greenhouse gas. We're working on that with 350 and SB 32. So all again here we have the connectivity of different issues that could come together to create a comprehensive solution. And that's what we want to be a part of and what we want to help support, Mr. Chairman. And lastly, again, the principles on dividing the revenue between the state and locals, the clear accountability and transparency, and then obviously the lockbox for the ensuring where the transportation revenues go. We are here, we are ready, and we are willing to be a partner with you from the business community standpoint to drive a solution. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. We look forward to the ability to help you do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Mr. Linder?
Thank you. I think you've mentioned some really thoughtful ways of helping fix this deficit. One of the things that Ms. Buss had mentioned earlier is that if you were to just take the amount of money that we would need and put it into a price per gallon of gasoline, I think you said just for the fuel alone, or just the counties alone, it was 54 cents, or just, it would be at least double that for the state, I would imagine. Now, you're talking about the economics of it. What would the impact of a surcharge like that on every driver be for the economic community?
Well, Mr. Linder, we obviously are always very concerned. People have to get to work. We want to grow these jobs. So as we know, all of us intrinsically understand from our own pocketbooks what the bottom line is as costs go up, what that means. But particularly, California is a 25% poverty rate. So we want to see as many Californians employed as possible in whatever sector they choose, but the costs are going to matter. So as they go up, they will impact the ability. But as we know, people mostly are still driving to be able to get to their jobs. So the approach in how you develop the solutions when we talk about being broad-based are going to be key, because as we know, if there's a push on any one piece of a funding solution, it can be disproportionate in its impact as you look to, obviously, our more disadvantaged communities. We want them to be able to get to work and hopefully have the jobs to employ them. So that's part of what we would ask for you in looking at these comprehensive solutions to take into account. Lastly, obviously, the business community is paying fees now for different compliance costs. We would hope that there's, again, the opportunity to have a discussion about how you bring some of that money back, if possible, to be able to apply it where it can be the most helpful. whether it's an offsetting disproportionate impacts or whether, directly to the roads and the operating fund. So we look forward to your deliberations. We look forward to your decision making because we believe this is going to be actually one of your finest hours. And we want to help implement that aggressively as that takes place.
Rob, also, could you expand on what multiplier this investment does into the community once you've taken, can you go elaborate on that, please?
So the multipliers, depending obviously upon who you talk to, but we believe that there's a strong multiplier for every dollar. We think it's even greater than actually what some of the estimates are. So some estimates have it at $7 as a multiplier, but we believe actually that the multipliers can be $10 and greater. We've spent a lot of time on this from the roundtable perspective in the past, and we've always believed it's been understated, Mr. Chairman. So we think in today's economy, that's even more so, given kind of where we are overall economically. So we, again, could not stress enough how important it is to be able to move efficiently as you make the decisions to be able to get these projects out there, particularly because of that multiplier effect. So thank you.